The attic smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Alex wiped a bead of sweat from their forehead as they shifted another box of old books, the floorboards creaking beneath their feet. Sunlight filtered through a small, grimy window, casting long shadows across the cluttered space. Their grandparents' house was being sold, and the task of clearing out decades of accumulated belongings had fallen to Alex and their parents. "Anything useful up there?" their mother called from the bottom of the stairs, her voice muffled by the layers of time between them. "Not unless you consider a broken lamp and a stack of 1980s magazines useful," Alex replied, rolling their eyes. They knelt to open another box, this one filled with faded photographs and yellowed envelopes. As they sifted through the contents, their fingers brushed against something solid, a small, wooden box tucked beneath a pile of newspapers. The box was no larger than a shoebox, its surface worn smooth with age. A tarnished brass lock held it shut, but the key was nowhere to be found. Alex shook it gently, hearing the faint rustle of paper inside. Curiosity prickled at the edges of their mind. They glanced toward the attic door, half expecting their mother to appear and tell them to leave it alone. But the stairs remained silent. Using a screwdriver they found in a nearby toolbox, Alex pried the lock open. The hinges groaned in protest as they lifted the lid. Inside, a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon lay atop a small, sepia-toned photograph. The woman in the picture was unfamiliar, her dark eyes staring intently into the camera, her lips pressed into a faint smile. She looked young, no older than Alex was now, but there was something haunting about her expression. Beneath the photograph was a folded piece of paper, brittle with age. Alex carefully unfolded it, their breath catching as they realized it was a birth certificate. The name on it, Maria Elena Garcia *, meant nothing to them, but the date and place of birth sent a jolt through their chest. It was their grandmother's hometown, dated years before she had met their grandfather. Alex's heart raced as they untied the ribbon and unfolded one of the letters. The handwriting was delicate, the words written in Spanish, a language Alex had never learned. They stared at the page, their minds spinning with questions. What was this box doing hidden in the attic? Who was Maria Elena Garcia? And why had their grandmother kept this a secret for so long? Here's a 400-word version of the discovery scene. Following the opening, Alex sat cross-legged on the attic floor, the wooden box resting in their lap. The air felt heavier now, as if the dust itself was holding its breath. They carefully unfolded one of the letters, the paper crackling softly under their fingertips. The words were written in elegant, looping cursive, but the language was Spanish, a language Alex had never learned. Frustration bubbled up as they scanned the page, recognizing only a few words. Mi hija, my daughter, amor, love, and siempre, always. The photograph of the young woman felt warm in their hands, as if it carried the weight of a story waiting to be told. Her eyes seemed to follow Alex, pleading for something they couldn't yet understand. Beneath the stack of letters, they found a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with more handwriting, some entries in Spanish and others in English. Alex's heart skipped a beat as they recognized their grandmother's handwriting in the English passages. One entry stood out, dated July 12, 1965. I held her for only a moment, but I will carry her with me forever. They told me it was for the best, that I was too young, that I had no choice. But how can a mother forget her child? How can I ever forgive myself? Alex's hands trembled as they pieced together the fragments of the story. Their grandmother had had a child, a daughter, before she met their grandfather. The birth certificate confirmed it. Maria Elena Garcia, born in 1965, in the same small town where their grandmother had grown up. The letters, the photograph, the journal. They were all pieces of a secret life, a story buried for decades. The sound of footsteps on the stairs startled Alex. They quickly shoved the letters back into the box, but it was too late. Their mother appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward the box. Alex hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I found it hidden under some old newspapers. It's Grandma's." Their mother stepped closer, her expression unreadable. She picked up the photograph, her fingers brushing over the young woman's face. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a sigh, she sat down beside Alex, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the secret had finally caught up to her. "I always wondered if you'd find this someday," she said quietly. "Your grandmother never wanted anyone to know. But I guess it's time you heard the truth. Here's a 400-word version of the confrontation scene, following the discovery." The attic felt smaller now, the air thick with unspoken words. Alex's mother sat beside them, the photograph of the young woman still in her hands. Her fingers traced the edges of the picture, as if trying to connect with a past she had never fully understood. "Who is she?" Alex asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Their mother sighed, her gaze fixed on the photograph. "Her name was Maria. She was your grandmother's daughter. My half-sister." Alex's breath caught in their throat. "Why didn't anyone ever tell me? Why didn't you tell me?" "It wasn't my story to tell," their mother replied, her voice tinged with regret. "Your grandmother carried this secret her entire life. She made me promise never to speak of it." "But why?" Alex pressed, frustration bubbling to the surface. Why would she hide something like this? Maria was her child. Their mother set the photograph down and turned to face Alex. "Things were different back then. Your grandmother was young, only 17, and unmarried. Her family was strict, and the town, well, people weren't kind to girls in her situation. They told her she had no choice but to give the baby up for adoption. She never forgave herself for it." Alex's mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of their stern, reserved grandmother with the young woman in the photograph. A woman who had loved and lost so deeply. Did she ever try to find her? Maria, I mean. Their mother shook her head. She wanted to, but she was afraid. Afraid of what she might find. Afraid of being rejected. And as the years went by, it just became easier to pretend it never happened. Alex looked down at the letters, the journal, the birth certificate, all pieces of a life that had been erased. But this isn't just her story. It's ours too. Maria is part of our family, whether we knew about her or not. Their mother reached out, placing a hand on Alex's arm. "I know, and maybe it's time we did something about that. But you have to understand, this isn't just about finding Maria. It's about facing everything your grandmother tried to bury. The shame, the guilt, the pain. Are you ready for that?" Alex hesitated, then nodded. "I need to know. For her. For us." Their mother smiled faintly, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "Then we'll do it together." Here's a 400-word version of the search scene, following the confrontation. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, online searches, and late-night conversations. Alex and their mother sat at the kitchen table, the wooden box and its contents spread out between them. The letters, now carefully translated with the help of a bilingual friend, revealed more about Maria's birth and the heartbreak their grandmother had endured. One letter, in particular, stood out. A heartfelt plea from their grandmother to the adoptive family, begging them to love Maria as she could not. "We need to start with the birth certificate," Alex's mother said, pulling up a genealogy website on her laptop. "If we can find records of Maria's adoption, we might be able to track her down." Alex nodded, their fingers tapping nervously on the table. "What if she doesn't want to be found? What if she's angry?" "Then we'll respect that," their mother replied gently. "But we have to try. For your grandmother. For us." They started with the town where Maria had been born, reaching out to local archives and churches for any records of adoptions in 1965. It was slow, tedious work, and more than once, Alex felt like giving up. But then they'd look at the photograph of Maria, her dark eyes so much like their grandmother's, and they'd keep going. A breakthrough came a week later, when a kind archivist at the town's historical society found a record of Maria's adoption. The name of the family who had taken her in was listed, along with a note that they had moved to a nearby city shortly after the adoption. "This is it," Alex said, their voice trembling with excitement. "We're so close." Using the new information, they searched online directories and social media, looking for any trace of Maria. Hours turned into days, and just as they were about to hit another dead end, Alex's mother let out a gasp. "I think I found her," she said, turning the laptop toward Alex. On the screen was a profile for a woman named Maria Elena Martinez, her last name changed after marriage. Her photo, though older, bore a striking resemblance to the young woman in the attic photograph. Alex's heart raced as they read through the profile. Maria was a retired teacher, living just a few hours away. She had 2 children and a handful of grandchildren. There was even a phone number listed. "What do we do now?" Alex asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Their mother took a deep breath. "We call her." Here's a 400-word version of the reunion scene, following the search. The cafe was quiet, the hum of soft music and the occasional clink of cups filling the air. Alex sat at a corner table, their hands clasped tightly in their lap. Across from them, their mother fidgeted with her napkin, her eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. The call had been made, the arrangements set, and now they waited. When the door opened, Alex's breath caught in their throat. A woman stepped inside, her dark hair streaked with gray, her eyes scanning the room. She looked just like the photograph, older, of course, but unmistakably the same. "Maria." Their mother stood, her voice trembling as she called out, "Maria?" The woman turned, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of them. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Maria walked toward the table, her steps hesitant but deliberate. "You're her family," Maria said, her voice soft but steady. "Aren't you?" Alex's mother nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, I'm Elena, your sister. And this is my child, Alex." Maria's gaze shifted to Alex, and for a moment, they felt as if they were looking into their grandmother's eyes. The resemblance was uncanny. Maria reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the back of a chair to steady herself. "I always wondered," she said, her voice breaking. "I tried to find her once years ago, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't even know her name." Alex's mother stepped forward, pulling Maria into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "She wanted to find you, but she was afraid. She never stopped thinking about you." Maria clung to her, tears streaming down her face. "I forgave her a long time ago. I just wanted to know where I came from, who I was." Alex watched, their own eyes filling with tears. They reached into their bag and pulled out the photograph, the one from the attic. "This is you," they said, holding it out to Maria. "She kept this. She kept you." Maria took the photograph, her fingers brushing over the image of her younger self. "I remember this," she said softly. "It was taken just before she had to let me go." For the next hour, they sat together, sharing stories and piecing together the past. Maria spoke of her life, her adoptive family, her career, her children. Alex and their mother shared memories of their grandmother, painting a picture of the woman Maria had never known but always carried in her heart. By the time they left the cafe, the weight of the secret had lifted, replaced by a sense of connection and hope. For the first time, Alex felt like their family was whole. Here's a 400-word version of the aftermath scene, following the reunion. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Maria became a regular presence in their lives, visiting for family dinners, sharing stories, and slowly filling in the gaps of their shared history. Alex found themselves drawn to her, fascinated by the way her laugh echoed their grandmother's and the way her hands moved when she spoke. So familiar, yet entirely new. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Maria pulled out an old photo album she had brought with her. "I didn't have much from my early years," she explained, flipping through the pages. "But these are my children and my grandchildren. They're your family, too." Alex leaned in, studying the faces in the photographs. It was strange to think that these people, strangers just weeks ago, were now part of their story. "Do they know about us?" they asked. Maria nodded. "I told them everything. They were shocked, of course, but they're eager to meet you. Family is family, after all." Alex's mother smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "It's like we've been given a second chance, a chance to make up for all the years we lost." But not everything was easy. There were moments of tension, times when the weight of the past felt overwhelming. Maria's adoptive family had been kind and loving, but she still carried the scars of being separated from her birth mother. And Alex's mother struggled with guilt, wondering if she could have done more to help her own mother heal. One afternoon, Alex found their mother sitting alone in the garden, staring at a photograph of her parents. "Do you think she would have wanted this?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Do you think she would have been happy?" Alex sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I think she would have been proud of us. Proud that we're trying to make things right." Their mother nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You're right. She would have loved Maria. She would have loved seeing us together." As the months passed, the family began to find a new rhythm. Maria's children and grandchildren visited, and the house that had once felt so empty was now filled with laughter and life. Alex felt a sense of belonging they hadn't realized they'd been missing. One day, they visited their grandmother's grave, bringing flowers and the old photograph from the attic. As they placed it beside the headstone, Alex whispered, "We found her, Grandma. We found Maria. And we're going to take care of each other, just like you would have wanted." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, it felt like a response, a quiet, gentle acknowledgement. Alex smiled, feeling a sense of peace they hadn't known was possible. Here's a 400-word ending scene, wrapping up the story with a heartfelt conclusion. The years that followed were a tapestry of healing, connection, and newfound love. Maria became an integral part of the family, her presence a bridge between the past and the present. She brought with her not only her own stories, but also a sense of closure that Alex and their mother hadn't realized they needed. The attic, once a place of dust and forgotten memories, now felt like a treasure chest that had unlocked a deeper understanding of who they were. Alex often found themselves reflecting on the journey, how a single discovery had reshaped their understanding of family, identity, and forgiveness. They thought about their grandmother often, imagining how she might have felt if she could see them now. One evening, as they sat with Maria on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Alex asked, "Do you think she's watching over us?" Maria smiled, her eyes soft with warmth. "I like to think so. I feel her here, in the way we laugh together, in the way we've learned to love each other. She's a part of us always." Alex's mother joined them, carrying a tray of tea and cookies. "She would have been so proud of you," she said to Maria, her voice filled with emotion, "and of all of us, for finding our way back to each other." As the years passed, the family grew even closer. Maria's children and grandchildren became a regular part of their lives, and holidays were filled with laughter, shared traditions, and new memories. Alex often marveled at how something as simple as a dusty box in an attic could change everything. One summer afternoon, the family gathered at the house for a reunion. The air was filled with the smell of grilled food and the sound of children playing. Alex stood by the garden, watching as Maria told stories to a group of wide-eyed grandchildren. Their mother joined them, slipping an arm around their shoulders. "You did this," she said softly. "You brought us all together." Alex shook their head. "We all did. It was a team effort." Their mother smiled, squeezing their shoulder. "I'm so proud of you. And I know she would be, too." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Alex felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. They had uncovered a secret, yes, but more importantly, they had found a family. One that was stronger, fuller, and more connected than ever before. And as they looked around at the faces of their loved ones, Alex knew that their grandmother's story, her pain, her love, and her hope, would live on in all of them.